Mirëmbrëma dhe mirë si vini në Kallxo.com. Jemi këtu në forumin ndërkombëtar të grave për siguri edhe paqë, në të cilën ishin shumë zyrtar nga e gjithë bota dhe i cili u organizu në patronatin e Vjosa Osmanit, presidentës Kosovës. Derisa shumë njerëz nga e gjithë bota ishim këtu, ne folëm me presidentin e Maltës, Vella. Ishte me rëndësi me taku presidentin e Maltës sepse është hera e tretë që ky njeri vjen në Kosovë. Herën e parë ka qenë si ministër i punëve të jashtme në 2013 kur ka nënshkruar marrëveshje bashkëpunimi me Kosovë. Tash vjen si presidenti i Maltës dhe ne e pyetëm për disa çështje. Qysh mundet Malta dhe presidenti i saj me i ndihmu Kosovës në liberalizimin e vizave, sepse Malta është vend që është antar i BE-s. Qysh mundet me i ndihmu në antarësim në NATO, qysh mundet me i ndihmu me votën e saj edhe në Këshillin e Evropës. Po mes tjerash, Malta, në hulumtimet tona, ka dalë si vend të cilën oligark kosovar kanë mujtë me shku dhe me regjistru kompani që quhen kompani guac, pra të cilave nuk i është ditë emni i pronarit, edhe me që ato kompani kanë ardhur në Kosovë edhe kanë marrë subvencione për energji solare. Ne dashëm me pyet presidentin e Maltës se a është hala Malta të u përdor si parajs për shpërlarje të pareve, sepse si shtet i tillë edhe është fut në një listë të hirt nga Bashkimi Evropian, listë të hirt si vend që shpërlan para, së cilës ju ka dashur 2-3 vjet Maltës për me dalë pe asaj liste. Çka janë mësimet që mundet me mësu Kosova në këtë betejë që e ka pas Malta, jo vetëm për antarësinë në Bashkimin Evropian, po edhe në betejë me luftu korrupsionin apo reputacionin e një shteti që shpërlan pare? Këto janë pyetjet që ja bona presidentit Maltës, të shohim çka tha. Mr. Vella, it is first time you come as president of Malta here, but you were here first time in 2013 as a foreign minister of Malta. What has changed in your view since the first time you've been here?
Well, I don't see anything particular except the determination of the people of Kosovo to move on in their quest for coming near to the European Union and to becoming members of the international institutions. That is becoming more and more acute as time passes. That is the most important thing which impressed me.
So, considering that Kosovo community in Malta is very small, I would rather ask you, what can Malta do for Kosovo? Considering it's a small country, Kosovo is a small country, not in the EU. You are a small country in the EU. What can you do for Kosovo?
Well, first of all, we can give good advice. As you say, a small country can understand another small country much better than the bigger ones. That is to start with. Apart from that, we have just been through the process, but it was only 2004, the process of becoming members of the European Union, so we clearly remember what it means, going through the screening and going through the negotiations, and it is something which I have repeatedly offered to the authorities that we would be very glad to help when the time comes. And apart from that, being members also of institutions like the Council of Europe and other institutions, OSCE and WHO, we can always help by our vote and even by lobbying other countries to look in a sympathetic way to Kosovo to become member of these institutions.
People who are watching us are one of the very young Europeans, but at the same time, they are pretty isolated. The main thing on people's minds, on an average person's mind tonight, is the fact that they feel EU is being unfair, not giving visa liberalization to Kosovo. What can you do to help in that direction?
Well, we're the smallest country in the European Union, and even though we have a voice, but it makes a lot of difference which country you are to start with. Secondly, I beg not to differ completely with you when you say that you're isolated, because if one looks at the last report of the Commission, one sees a certain urgency and the fact that the European Union now is looking at the issue of the Balkan countries, and even Kosovo obviously included, from a different angle. It's not a question of looking at the interests of the Balkan region itself, but at the interests of the European Union. And it's quite clear in that report that the European Union is conscious that it is in its best interest to make the process as fast as possible, obviously with the application of due diligence and the considerations that one has to take. But there is an urgency in that report, which gives me the impression that the European Union will be looking at the issue in a different way and treating the Western Balkans in a different way because it suits the European Union.
But do you remember Thessaloniki summit 20 years ago? What you just said now, the urgency, could have been almost similar to 20 years ago.
Not the same language.
Not the same language?
Not the same language and not in the same circumstances as we are living today.
Okay, so can I be a bit more direct and say it took a war with Ukraine for Western Balkans to become
it's not only the war. It's not only the war. It's the interest being shown by other powers in the Balkan regions.
And Russia.
And the people of the Balkans themselves becoming restless now. They're saying it's been too long, you've been promising us for too long, and now we want to see things being delivered. There is a certain urgency in that report. Go read it again and you'll see that it gives you a different sense of urgency.
But in this urgency for the entire region, I want to point out the nuance for Kosovo. We are a country the only country that, apart from not being in visa liberalization, are not on Partnership for Peace NATO program.
Okay.
Yet, Serbia, that didn't put sanctions to Russia, is. Kosovo isn't. Isn't it ironic that we can't even become part of the Partnership for Peace process?
But have you tried to do that?
Kosovo is trying to do that.
But
is in the process.
It's in the process, but there was no final decision on that.
What can Malta do to help?
We can help with, as I said, with lobbying and with promising our vote and our backing. We'll be vociferous on that, and this is why I said before we started the interview that I'm going back richer than I came, because now I'm much more sensitized and more sensitive to what we've been told, and I'm sure that we'll be voicing your concerns with friends and colleagues whom we can trust and with whom we can push for quicker decisions being taken in the situation of Kosovo.
We talked of the EU, NATO. I want to know what can you do to help us in Council of Europe application that Kosovo has.
Council of Europe is not unanimous. Council of Europe is a two-thirds majority, and it's a topic which I talked about with both the President herself and even with the Speaker of Parliament today. It's a question of lobbying and also going around and seeing exactly what the situation is at the moment. I have figures. I don't have figures myself, but I don't think it's beyond the possibility of being achieved. Two-thirds is not that difficult.
When you just said you're going back richer, sensitized over the important issues, what are the issues that you're going to take away from this forum where you've been for 2 days?
The issues we're talking about. The urgency of the people of Kosovo who have become somewhat restless now to be treated differently, to be given more attention, to be satisfied by the way things start moving, and with the hope that in the foreseeable future solutions will be found. This is the
And when you were here in 2013, you signed a memorandum of understanding as a foreign minister with Kosovo. What has been achieved from what you've signed in 2013 and then updated it later?
Okay, I mean, what has been achieved can be obviously seen from the cooperation that existed between the two countries. As a matter of fact, that agreement is up for renewal at the moment. I'll just give you an example. Next week there's going to be a batch of diplomats from Kosovo who are going to be start their training in the Academy of Diplomatic Studies in Malta. That's one of the aspects. On the other hand, obviously, we're not talking about trade because that is something which is different, but cooperation in the cultural and the political aspects is going on. Even the Parliamentary Friendship Association between the two parliaments. Obviously, everything can be more productive. There could be more cooperation. There could be more exchanges between the two countries. But that obviously depends on the people in government.
Okay, people who watch us also know about economic relationships between Kosovo and Malta. Unfortunately, the most referenced points are when Kosovo oligarchs went to Malta to register companies which ended up to be shell companies who got subsidized for solar energy in Kosovo. I'm interested to know what is Malta doing to repair its image from having gone into the gray list for money laundering, which is what Kosovo oligarchs have been using it for also. What has Malta been doing?
That was an episode which now is past, and Malta has done a lot to make sure that whatever was lacking in the regulations and the institutions be repaired. Today there is a lot of emphasis about beneficial ownership of investments. There's a lot of emphasis on scrutiny of registrations, and I can tell you that I don't have figures at hand, but I can tell you that scores of companies, once the scrutiny has become more strict, that have been referred and have been fined. I think I'm sure in saying that millions of euros have been imposed as fines on companies that were found not to be 100% up to scratch. So we have learned the lesson, and I can tell you that the regulatory authorities now, after we've been put back out of the grey list, have learned the lesson, and we are doing things the way they should be done.
So you were in the grey lists as criticism for money laundering. You are out. What can Kosovo learn from that example? Also, Kosovo wasn't doing well in corruption standards at all, and in anti-corruption efforts. I'm interested to know, what efforts do you think Kosovo can learn from that battle of yours?
Well, first of all, there has to be an analysis of what the situation is like, and then compare notes to see what used to be taken as acceptable in the past, knowing today it's not acceptable, and to copy the reforms and the stricter measures that have been imposed by Malta after we learned the lesson of the grey listing.
During this lesson, actually, our team managed to get to Maltese databases of businesses, which were in the end transparent. We paid a fee to get access to your companies.
To the NBR?
Yes, and eventually,
okay.
I just have to thank you that eventually, if you pay the fee to get access to your databases, they are transparent in the end. That's how we found the Kosovo businessman that got registered there. But I'm interested to know, do you know how many Kosovo officials or businessmen registered companies in Malta?
I wouldn't know. Yeah. I wouldn't know. But as you're saying, I mean, if you want to ask through the proper registration authorities, you'll get the information.
And for people who saw lots of our politicians going to Malta, there's a list of many visits that have happened in the last 10 years from Kosovo to Malta. People will wonder whether they visited because it was a money laundering haven or because of diplomatic
It's not a money laundering haven. What I'm saying is that our systems could have been not 100% foolproof. And once we were on the grey list, we realized that there were certain niches that had to be tightened up. And this is what we did. We're not interested in dirty money. We're not interested in money to support terrorism or criminal activities. And we want to be sure that whoever is registering investment, we will know exactly who are the beneficial owners of those funds. Besides that, I mean, it doesn't pay to have a system whereby you're telling people who are criminal people, come and invest in Malta because this is money laundering.
I think that's a very important
money
message.
Laundering haven. It's not.
Very important message for you to say.
Definitely
people in this conference spoke a lot about how supportive you have been of Kosovo. And when I read the history of neutrality that Malta has, I'm wondering whether you were asked, and there's a big community, Serbian community in Malta, there's big import-export of 10 million euros or more between Serbia and Malta. I'm wondering whether you've been asked by Serbia to de-recognize Kosovo, whether they've lobbied your country against Kosovo.
And even if they did, that is something which is the internal policy of the government, and I'm sure that no foreign country will dictate to our democratic government what to do with its relations with other countries.
Because I'm an investigative journalist in Kosovo and I run Balkan Investigative Reporting Network, I cannot not ask you in the end of our interview about the final findings. What is Malta doing to catch the killers of Daphne, Gorana and Galzia? Where is the situation right now with her case?
If you're investigating the case, you know as much as I do that 4 persons are already behind bars. 3 of them are also behind bars waiting for trial. And that's all the evidence that we have at the moment. We'll wait for justice to take its due course. And if further evidence is brought by anybody about any person, however high in office or whoever he is, I'm sure that Malta will take all the necessary steps to see that justice is done.
And how is the situation for today's investigative journalists improved in Malta?
Of course it has. It has. As a matter of fact, the Prime Minister himself was in meetings with the Institute of Journalists, because the first draft of legislations that the government was going to present to Parliament, they said that they wanted them more tightened up. They wanted to have their opinion on them. And as a matter of fact, government decided to stop the draft legislation that there was in front of Parliament, to give time to the Institute of Journalists to discuss with him and tell him exactly what they want and how they would be happy, or with what situation they would be happy. Now, it's an open system which is moving on, in my opinion, very well, moving ahead as it should.
Mr. Vella, thanks a lot for the interview.
Thank you.